To you, to our viewers, thank you for joining us. We're here this morning with a special program, the Israel Social Cohesion Summit 2021 of the Anti-Defamation League in Israel. The summit and the broadcast today will deal with the issue of social cohesion and how much we need it, especially in light of this past year, which has been so challenging and has raised the matter of social issues to the top of the agenda. We have a busy day of discussions and speakers, but I would like first to turn to Carol Nouriel, the director of the Anti-Defamation League in Israel, who will open the conference. Carol, go ahead. Thank you, Alexandra. I'm very happy to be here to open this summit. And as you said, we have all and still going through a very meaningful year in terms of the political instability, as well as in terms of our health. It is a year that has reflected how dependent we are on one another, and no sector or geographical region can live disconnected from the others in terms of morbidity. This is a year that raised the importance of re-examining our shared life together in all of society and all the sectors of Israeli society. I hope the day will come where we will be able to put the coronavirus behind us and look at the day after, and we all need to think how we will create a reality in which there is room for everyone and every voice will be heard. I would like to mention the partners to this very important platform that crosses all sectors, the EBZ Foundation and our wonderful partners here in Ynet and the Times of Israel website. We're here to discuss in depth the social subjects that are on the agenda of the State of Israel. And you know what? Coronavirus has enabled us to do something a little different. Let's see, not how we bring people to the summit, but how we usually do it, but how we bring the summit to the people. We are launching our mobile studio of the Israel Social Cohesion Summit 2021 with our mobile studio, which will bring the voices from the field. And we are bringing the world of the corona from the air-conditioned studios to your home, and join us on this journey, which will talk about you to all of us. Before we think about the day after, let's analyze first what we've experienced in the past year and how the corona crisis has affected the balances and dynamics in Israel. And I understand that in advance of the summit, you conducted a survey that investigated the various social aspects. And let's see how Israeli society sees itself this year. Does it see itself as divided or perhaps united? And the news is not that good. We have been seeing ourselves as increasingly divided. Israeli society in terms of its social cohesion, 81% believes that we are a divided, not united society. And when a society makes that kind of reflection, it's concerning, especially since 4 years ago we were in a better situation. So we're seeing a consistent rise in terms of polarization in Israel. So the news is not that good, but I think that everyone that lives here feels that personally. Which group feels the most discriminated against? So we asked about which groups feel discriminated against as opposed to the stronger groups. And here we see on the slide, we see that the Ethiopian population in Israel feels the most discriminated against, followed by the Arab population. And that's what Israelis think about the most discriminated against groups in Israeli society. We also see that when sectors and groups reflect about themselves, they always think that they are the most discriminated against in Israeli society. And we will also try with the spotlights today to understand the feelings in some of these sectors. So let's talk about the ultra-Orthodox society, the Haredi society. What did the findings show? And was there a change, a substantial change in how the general population looks at Haredi society, perhaps in wake of some problematic behavior on their part? I'd like to start with a general question that we asked. We asked, to what extent do you think Haredi society is an integral part of Israeli society? And we found that about a third of the people believe that Haredi society is an integral part of society. But we also wanted to say what the impact of the Corona year was, and we asked, have you changed your views about Haredi society in wake of the Corona crisis? And if you changed, was it for the better or for the worst? And the figure that we got surprised us, even though we deal with these issues on a day-to-day basis. We found that 56% of Israeli society had changed their views for the worse regarding Haredi society. And I want to say what frightens us even more than this figure, the discourse that this figure generates. It is a, a, a discourse of delegitimization against an entire part of society. It generalizes against an entire part of Israeli society, and that's very dangerous. And we all need to take this survey into account, including us in the media. And as sometimes we participate, we mediate information that comes to us. And I'd like to talk about Arab citizens of Israeli society. Do they feel part of Israeli society? And does society as a whole view them as equal members of society? And also, as we always ask now, has the coronavirus changed that view? We see that similar to the Haredi society, Israeli society views Arab society not entirely as an integral part of Israeli society. We see 30% of Israeli society believe that the Arabs are an integral part, and we see the continuation of a trend from previous surveys that there is a feeling generally that Arab society is not an integral part of Israeli society. But a very interesting figure when we compare it to the previous figure is the change in the view regarding the Arab sector of society on the part of general Israeli society. We found 28% of Israeli society changed their view in wake of the Corona crisis for the worse. But when we compare it to 65%, which is double, that changed their views about or 56% that changed their views about Haredi society, we see that something has changed in the past year. Were you surprised by this figure, this gap between the feeling in Israeli society as a whole towards Haredi society and the Arab citizens of Israel? Did that surprise you? Yes, I think it did, especially in light of the fact that we are consistently measuring the feelings towards these underserved populations. We saw that Ethiopian population was first, and only then Arab population. The Arab population were the leaders in terms of feeling weaker than general Israeli society. And I think that balance has changed a bit in light of the coronavirus, and we're seeing similar trends towards the Haredi society. And in the bottom line, I'd like to ask you, in light of the findings, is there room for optimism? Is there a positive aspect? Yes, there is a very significant positive point. We found that we asked Israeli citizens, are you interested in getting to know the other, getting to know other cultures and other groups? And we found that 57%, more than half of the respondents, said that they wanted to get to know other parts of Israeli society. And when we talk about breaking down walls and alienation, this is a very optimistic ray of light. And Alexandra, further to this survey, which gave us a lot of figures and numbers, we wanted to see what's happening on the ground, to speak to Israelis in the street and I think Israeli society is today divided. It's expressed in the different views. It's expressed in the results of the elections, which are so divided each time anew. And it comes from the top, from the Knesset. There is racism between the different groups, between Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews, between Jews and Arabs, and it starts from the politicians. The secular people have no idea what's happening among the Haredim, because what you see on TV is not representative. The problem is not that we are different, but that we haven't found a way to get along with one another. If somebody does something, people accuse the Haredim. Nobody feels that they can change something. There's something that will change. I think we are divided. I'm discriminated because of my color, not because of who I am. We need to educate people that you don't need to discriminate against Arabs, Ethiopians, or Haredim. I grew up in Iran and I lived with Arabs. We lived very well together. I came from Morocco to France and then immigrated to Israel. To me, everybody is the same. Everybody has to live together. We have to learn to get along together, and that's all. There's no place like Jerusalem, and there's no place like Tel Aviv. There's no warmth like we have here in Israel. People love each other. The chutzpah, that people can come up to you in the street and talk to you, and people are happy to help. I think that there is love of Israel only in Israel. Everybody knows we know how to live together. I believe in the ability of people to work together, even if they disagree. You don't have to agree about everything, otherwise it would be boring.